Hello, I'm Rick Hill. Thank you for joining me for Godly Play. This week I'm going to continue the story of King David. Remember last week I told you how, as a young boy, David was chosen by God to be the next king. As a boy, he played music to help soothe King Saul. He showed his bravery on the battlefield. And when David grew up, he became a soldier in King Saul's army. But when King Saul and his sons died, David became king. People came and said, "You shall be the shepherd over all of God's people." One of the first things that David did as king was he went to the city of Jerusalem, and he took the city from the Jebusite people. So now people of God had two cities, the city of David in Bethlehem and the city of David in Jerusalem. David also remembered how the Philistines had taken away the golden ark, the ark that contained the rules God had given to his people. So David sent his army out against the Philistines, and they defeated the Philistines, and they brought the ark back to Jerusalem. And they placed it in the tent, a tent very similar to the tent they used when they were wandering in the desert. David danced when the ark came back to the city of Jerusalem, as he was so happy and filled with joy. King David had so much pride that he wanted to build a beautiful house for the ark and for God and for God's people. But God said no. Season came when the armies went out to battle. King David sent his army out of Jerusalem, yet he stayed in Jerusalem. One afternoon, he saw a beautiful woman, Bathsheba. Now, Bathsheba was the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Yet King David wanted Bathsheba for himself. So King David sent Uriah the Hittite out to battle with his army. And Uriah died. And King David married Bathsheba. One day, God sent the prophet Nathan to visit with King David. Nathan the prophet told King David a parable. It was a story about a rich man and a poor man that lived in the same town. Now the poor man had a small house. The rich man had a larger house. The rich man had many sheep. The poor man only had one lamb that was very special to him. It was a pet. He let this lamb eat out of his plate and drink out of his cup. And the lamb would sleep in his lap. It was like one of his children. One day, visitors came to visit the rich man. The rich man didn't want to take one of his sheep to serve to the strangers, to the visitors. So he took the poor man's lamb and served it to the visitors. This part of the story, when King David heard this, he was furious with the rich man. He said, "As the Lord lives, the man who did this deserves to die. He must pay for the lamb 4 times over because he did this thing and has no pity." Nathan the prophet looked at David. He said, "You are that rich man. God has given you everything, and yet you took Uriah's wife to be your own." David was filled with sorrow. He worried that he would die like King Saul had died. He felt sorry, and he asked God for forgiveness, and God forgave. King David and Bathsheba had a child, and that child died. But their next child, a son, was born to them, and his name was Solomon. Now, King David ruled for many years. He was not a perfect king. He made mistakes, yet he realized it and knew it, and he asked for forgiveness, and God gave it. King David ruled for many more years and had a rich and full life. And as he became older, he died, and he was buried in Jerusalem. His son Solomon became king. When Solomon grew up to be a king, he built a temple, a house for God, and for God's people, and for the ark of God. I wonder, which part of this story do you like the best? I wonder, have you ever had something that was so precious to you? I wonder, have you made mistakes? And have you been forgiven? I wonder what part of this story is the most important. Thank you for being with me for A Godly Play. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to being with you again next week.